Good evening. It is 6 o'clock, so I will call the school board meeting to order. If everyone could please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Veronica, when you're ready, roll call, please.
Mr. Imes?
Here.
Mr. McCreary?
Here.
Mr. McInnes?
Here.
Mrs. McKay? Here. Mrs. Snyder?
Here. All right, we will turn it over to Dr. Irucci in the superintendent's report.
Thank you. I am going to turn this over to Chris Besh to give us a culture update, and then I'll give you some more updates on the reopening plan and a few other items. I know Chris has a time crunch, so we're going to turn it over to her.
All right, Chris?
I'm on?
Hi, Chris. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Yes.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
So I am here just to share with you all just a quick update on kind of where the culture effort is and kind of where we're at with the different initiatives and the different work groups. And that's really what I'm here to do, as well as to answer any questions that you may have. So I'm going to cover what I shared in the staff update that I'm not quite sure. I gave it to Jen last week, but I don't know if it's gone out to the entire district yet. So that's the only, I guess, let me ask that. Does anyone know in this room yet if that communication has gone out yet with the update on the culture piece?
So it'll go out Friday of this week.
It'll go out this Friday.
It'll go out this Friday.
Yes.
Okay, great. So, so we have the Kind, Candid, and Constructive Communication Initiative, which again, so everyone who's participating in the work groups received that training on the how to communicate in Funky Town, what to say and how to say it. Also, the DSC admin received that training, and then also so did the board, who all were invited to participate in that training as well, and a few of you were able to make it, which is fantastic. And then we're going to be doing the training with all of the rest of the district this Thursday. We've got 2 sessions that we're running online. And so the entire district will have that training, which I think is going to make a huge difference. I do think there's been people who are in the work groups or who are in the DSC admin who might have been like kind of waiting to have some of those conversations with their colleagues until their colleagues had that training. So kind of, you know, I've been checking in to say like, hey, is that training making a difference? What I've heard is that while people may not quite be having those conversations at the level that I'm looking to eventually get everyone to be having them on a pretty regular basis, so that, you know, it removes discord and it removes things that are in the space that impede communication and effectiveness, that it is offering access to say, hey, I feel like we're going into Funky Town, or I think I heard someone's like, hey, we're in downtown Funky Town, you know, so it's giving people kind of a way to be able to speak up and say, hey, this is feeling a little wonky or a little off, or let's be thoughtful about how we say some of these things. So the next steps are the training again this Thursday, August 20th, and then I will continue to do monthly check-ins with that core group that is also that work group, just checking in to be like, hey, what's working, what's not working, big picture from a culture perspective and a communication perspective. The second initiative is that clear, consistent, timely communication framework initiative. And where we're at with that initiative is we do have a working document. We do have I hate to call it a final draft, but we do have an initial draft of that framework that work group put together. And again, that work group is representative of a lot of different groups across the district. And most of the people from that work group are going to be able to participate this Wednesday. We're going to put together a video that basically walks through that framework, so that can also be shared out across the district along with the paper version of the document. And again, just speaks to the purpose, the intention, as well as that it is a working document, right? And that with that group, we'll check in on a semi-regular basis to say, how's the framework working? Do we need to adjust it? Do we need to, is there anything we realize is really missing that we didn't, capture in the first round? Or is there a bullet point that we put in there that like, gosh, that isn't really, effective and we need to, alter it a little bit. So that's that group, and again, that framework, the intention is to have that provided across the district and also covered in the building conversations in those 2 weeks that people are in the buildings, that staff, classified and certified, that they're in the buildings, that framework will also be covered at the building level. And then the student behavior initiative, which again has 33 people in that work group from all across the district. That one has really taken something, and again, I've just been just really impressed with actually all of the work groups. And I'll end on that. I'll come back and circle around to that. But in short, there's 7 practice work groups. Each work group got together outside of our big gathering to talk through, what could we meaningfully put in at the beginning of the school year that would really support behavior. And so each practice work group came with what they saw, and then we basically had to organize, okay, like, so how do we put all these different ideas together so and in a way that's not going to overwhelm all of our staff. And they came up with 4 priorities. So for the beginning of the school year, first and foremost, the next step action items are 1, alignment and clarity of student behavior expectations across every building and every participating role, right? So that's from student to parent family, to teachers, to classified staff, to building admin, to DSC, admins, so just across the whole kit and caboodle, making sure that those expectations are super clear and that they're aligned at each building. And then there's also going to be refresher restorative practices training at the building level, and also at the bus garage, right? Just again to make sure everyone's on the same page on that refresher restorative practice training. And then I know Greg Menzie has been working with EduClimber and that work group to put together a PowerPoint that shares very clearly like why EduClimber matters, how to best use it, and then also what's going to happen with that data, right? Because one of the things that we heard from the culture audit group, or from the culture audit results, were that teachers were having the experience of like putting information in there and not knowing what was happening with the data. So we're providing really clear, like here's what happens with that data and how things are addressed when there's multiple things put in there, and kind of how that progresses forward. And then last but not least, out of student behavior is building relationships with students. And the first effort around that is very simply making sure that all staff are present to really welcoming students into the building. And then each building has also been requested to take on 1 more practice to build relationships with students, and examples include classroom circles and equity sticks. And so all of that to say those are the 4 efforts that are going in place to really support student behavior at the very beginning of this school year, and then ongoing. Right now we're due to meet with the student behavior work group around the end of September. And that we have to coordinate everything else that's going on, right? To check in, like, how'd that go? How did the start of the school year go? Making sure to have all those expectations aligned, knowing that we had the EduClimber clarity in place, knowing that we're building relationships with students, putting in the restorative refresher training, restorative practices, refresher training. So we'll check in. How's that going? So those are really the highlights. And then one last piece that I would like to put in before I open it up for questions is that I just want to share with you all, I was with a friend of mine the other night, and I said to him, and he's kind of a colleague, and I just shared with him that I am so impressed and I am so taken with the commitment of this district. That even in the face of COVID, even in the face of all the uncertainty, even in the face of not knowing, are we online, are we going to be in schools, like how's this going to work? How are we going to be safe? How do we support our students' learning? That really everyone, especially in the work groups, has really just stepped up and said we're still committed to making sure we create a work environment that benefits all of us, like all of us in this district, the people we're serving, the families, the community, the students, and then the teachers and the classified staff, the certified staff, and the admin staff. And it's just been, it's really just been remarkable. And for people to take the time out of their lives during this time when they don't have to, and really step up and put in the work, put in the effort, come up with the ideas, even in the face of concerns and wondering, like, is this really going to make a difference? It's still just like being like, all right, we said we were going to make this happen and we're doing it, even if it's taking a little bit. So I just want to say I really, really acknowledge this entire district, and as a board, right, you all are like, there's a holding of space that you guys provide for the entire district, and the fact that several of you showed up for the Funky Town training, and I know you have, people come to you and share with you what they see, and that is a little bit, again, I've shared with you all. I'd love to hear if there's anything that you're hearing about what's working or not, what's not working, or any concerns, because, right, you're a part of this whole community as well, obviously. But I'm going to stop because I know you guys have a lot of other things to cover on your agenda, and I want to give you just a few moments to ask any questions, or if there's anything that you want clarified, I'm here to answer.
Thank you, Chris. And thank you for the dedication and time that you are putting in with our staff. And thank you for the kind words. I know as a board member, I truly appreciate, the district and the staff, putting in the work to have these hard, funky conversations. And as we think about it, culture is one thing that we can control in our district and in this time of uncertainty. And while there's so many things that we can't control, our culture is one of them. So I think it's a perfect timing for this piece to take place in our district. So does anyone have any questions for Chris?
Well, I appreciate your kind words as well, Chris, because I knew, it was in my head anyway, going into this is hard work. This is tough work. But then when you add the stress of the pandemic on top of that, I think it's absolutely remarkable what our staff is doing with your leadership. So we're very proud of that and anxious to carry forward.
You can be really proud. I mean, I'm proud. And I'm like, it's funny, because I was like, I'm just so proud of him. Is what I said to my colleague. I'm just so proud, and I'm so moved.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right. Are there any more comments or remarks?
Just thank you.
Yes, Chris, thank you for taking the time tonight to join us.
Yeah, thank you all, and just sending you all the goodness for all the decisions that you all are in the process of trying to make and configure and implement, and just all the things. So thank you again for taking the time to include the update so that you're in the know. And again, everything that I just shared with you will be going out in the staff update.
All right, thank you so much.
All right, thank you all. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
All right, next we'll move on to the reopening update.
Thank you. I just, before I start, just want to echo some of the comments that Chris made. We get updates, and really the work is really being done and just facilitated by Chris, but a lot of the work is, our administration and staff are really working hard together, especially in those two groups, the communication group and the behavior group, and they're making some really good progress. And I think we're all anxious to really start to implement this. Although we may have planned to implement it one way, it may change a little bit as far as how we go about implementing that. But I think we're still going to be able to adapt to what we're faced with now and still be able to get some good work done going into this year, both on the communication side and the behavior side. So yeah, I just want to also reiterate what Chris said in relation to what our staff is doing. So just talking a little bit about our reopening plan. We are still on track to open up school on August 31st. We are still on track to open up in a hybrid model. We've been getting a lot of questions about maybe how long that might occur. What is the measurement that we use to determine how long we're on hybrid? So I just want to share some information because we've been having some conversations with the health department around that. So the good news is we are seeing a downward trend in Marion County, and we just got updated on Friday of last week that we kind of expected us to move from red to orange. Because of our downward trend, we just happened, I guess, at the last minute to have a minor outbreak in one of the facilities here in town, which kind of kept us red. But Tracy and her team really feel like we continue on that. There's a good chance that we could be orange this week. Now, and again, in saying that, I think that's important to note because we are seeing a trend in cases, but that doesn't necessarily determine what we do as a school district. And so I want to, again, re-emphasize that red and orange, whatever, don't necessarily kick in a certain model for us. And again, what's important is what's inside those numbers and what determines those colors. Again, another positive is that we have not seen an upward trend in any of the adolescent cases. So as we've opened up, some athletics and kids are starting to get together again somewhat, I think we're doing a really good job here of making sure that the protocols are in place and that we're doing all we're supposed to be doing because we haven't seen that so far. Again, knock on wood, we've been doing a pretty good job of that. So that's a positive as well. And so, the health department, really across the state of Ohio, the health departments have come to some consensus on, taking a look at the trends and really looking for 4 consecutive weeks of a downward trend. And so, if they see that and we get to 4 consecutive weeks and we get to really see a decrease in the trends, then at that point we'll have a discussion about possibly changing the model. But, I kind of liken it to a lightning delay. I think you may have heard us talk about this. And, when there's a lightning delay in a sporting event, you have to wait 30 minutes and it has to be lightning free before you can restart the contest. But if at 28 minutes there's another lightning bolt, then you have to wait another 30 minutes. So we could be in that situation. It's not necessarily like we get to the 4th week and we're automatically looking at changing anything. So we also talked about, if we do get in a situation where we're seeing some real positivity in relation to the reduction of trends, and we are getting ready to make a recommendation to possibly change to allow for all students to come back, we would probably at that point also consider about a 2-week period just to really work on the transition of what that looks like. And so, we didn't really specifically talk about that in the reopening plan, but that would be the conversations we've been having across the county and with the health department, really to allow us some time to do that. So, if we go orange and we see that and we have 4 consecutive weeks, then possibly the minimum time we could even think about a different model would probably be 6 weeks. And let's hope in 6 weeks we can be having that conversation about coming back. The second thing is, today was our opening day for our staff. A little bit different than we're used to. I got to tell you, it was a little bit strange to do a opening address to the staff looking at a computer screen. But we did. I think we tried to make the best of that situation. The staff was very engaged. Tried to get some information out to them about what's happening in the district, about our literacy grant, some of the work that we've done with our police department. We talked about. We recognized some staff members who've been here quite some time, and we introduced all of our new staff today too. And then Chrissy Sprinkle, our school nurse, did a really great job of just going through different protocols for our staff members. How to wear a mask, what to look for with our kids. Just some certain symptoms to be aware of. So she spent about a half hour with our staff as well today. And now our staff really is concentrating on the next 2 weeks, really looking at what those protocols look like in the classroom. Where are we missing something? What happens in certain cases? Just trying to go through every possible scenario within each building. And I think that there's already a lot of good work being done. We're getting some questions that, again, that maybe we didn't think about, so we'll have an opportunity to work those out before the kids come on the 31st. So we have some professional development also sprinkled in here within the next 2 weeks. And we do have a new phonics program and some other things that we'll be providing professional development on. And so for the most part, we're going to spend in preparing for COVID precautions and protocols and getting ready for when the kids come back on the 31st. I want to talk just a little bit more about contact tracing. A lot of questions come up about what happens if a staff member or a student has been diagnosed with COVID and how will that be handled. And so the health department has specific protocol that they've recommended to all the school districts. We are actually putting that information together, and we want to get that information out to our families previous to when school starts so that they know what their expectations are as far as how we will report cases. We cannot report names or anything about, any specific classrooms or anything like that. If a student or a staff member is diagnosed with COVID, the health department is the first to be notified that. They have their system set up where you have to actually enter who's tested positive, and so that information goes directly to the health department. At that time, we will be contacted, the principal, the school nurse will be contacted to let them know that there has been a diagnosed case, just to be aware of that. And at that point in time, the health department does the contact tracing. So that's when they will request information, whether it's a staff member or a student. So that's why we do seating charts, so that we understand, which students might be in contact with other students, which students are a part of a classroom of staff members. And so at that point, then the health department actually starts the contact tracing. They ask that we don't release any of that information until they have started their contact tracing. At that point in time, when they tell us they've gone through that and they've notified folks, then we can let our community know that we've had diagnosed cases. And again, we can't give specifics, but we will allow our community, at least within the buildings, to know that we've had cases that of folks that have been diagnosed. And so that's the expectation, is that part, because I know a lot of our staff members and folks want to, how long does it take before they're notified that there is a case, and that is all determined by the health department. But as soon as they tell us that they've gone through their process, because they have to verify that information. So, and we certainly don't want to put information out there that's not accurate. And so again, we will continue to communicate with our families and our staff as we get updates from the health department. I can tell you that things have changed in the last couple of weeks. When we talk about daily assessments, there's recommendations about at one point we thought that we would probably do the best we could to do temperature checks. Mm-hmm. But now the guidelines have changed in regard to that, because temperature checks now, from what they understand, is only about 20% of, it only comes up about 20% of the time in cases that have been diagnosed. So the symptoms are, so you can't really base your whole concept of a daily assessment on temperature checks. And we don't want to give people a false sense of security, even that, if you don't have a temperature but you have a dry cough, that's still a symptom you need to be aware of. And I think there's a perception out there that a lot of it is related to temperature checks. So Marion City Schools, in our policy, was that we have daily assessments. We are going to ask our families previous to when the students come to make sure they do the daily assessment of their children. But we are also, as staff members, going to monitor, what our students look like, and should they, look like they may have some of those symptoms, then our nurses are prepared to do those assessments and checks. And that's part of what Chrissy went over today too with our staff.
Will parents need to write on a slip of paper?
No, they don't. They don't recommend that either.
Nothing.
That you kind of are putting some trust in parents that they. We've done as much as we possibly could to get as much information out to them. I know the health department has magnets now that they'll be sending out to all of our students, kind of put on the fridge to make sure they go through those. But that is up to parents to do that. But again, as students come, we will try to monitor the best we can and get children attention if they need to, if they misplace something. And I think that's about it right now in relation to the reopening plans. I don't know if you have any other questions in regard to that before I move on to my next topic.
What about shields? I think I read something
Yeah.
where shields Or not?
Shields are not an alternative to masks. So if
Okay.
you are going to wear a shield, you must have a mask now underneath it. Matter of fact, I'm not sure you even recommend shields anymore. But again, those are things that change.
Mhm.
We'll still have them, and who knows, that may change again. But
Okay.
we know that, you know, the actual masks, now we know, what do you call the ones you pull up?
The
Oh, the
gators?
Gators, yeah, that's not a mask. So we have to give these types of masks. They prefer, you know, something surgically, like a surgical mask or a cloth mask that covers your whole face, not something we can pull up and down.
Okay. Will that be any policy change in regards
Just
to the
informational,
mask?
just,
Okay,
you know, we're just trying to get information out. I mean, we still have a face covering policy.
right,
But as long as, and for us, it would just be the type of face covering.
okay.
So what will happen if a student or more than one student in a classroom or in several classrooms in a building is tested positive? I mean, I know that you'll do contact tracing, but would the building close? What happens?
Again, that's pretty much the recommendation of the health department. There is no specific policy in relation to the number of cases or anything along those lines. They do have some metrics that they use to determine that. But, you know, from what we're told by them is that they will monitor that situation, and if they see a potential outbreak, then they'll close the door. And we've known that kind of from the beginning, that there's a very good chance that if we do see something and we are forced to quarantine an entire building, we're ready to do that. But that would be based on a recommendation, again, from them.
Any further?
Okay, so one more item, I just, you'll see that there's an MOU on the agenda. I wanted to just talk a little bit about that. You know, we've had constant conversations with our police department. You know, we have 4 SROs in the district, and just having conversations about their roles and responsibilities. We've had conversations about, you know, their uniforms and, you know, how they're perceived within all of our buildings. So, you know, really the number one responsibility or role of a school resource officer is to provide safety within the district. And I know that was a concern and why we added another SRO to the district to help with some of our elementaries and our alternative schools, and really around providing that safety. The second most important role and responsibility is really to build positive relationships with our students and our staff. And so the police department just felt like that we needed to have a memorandum of understanding and kind of outline what those roles and responsibilities are. And I think we've had a situation where some of our SROs were put in a position of almost being kind of a disciplinarian in a building, and that's kind of what it evolved to, and that's really not what the role of an SRO is. And so I really appreciate, last Tuesday we had a meeting with Chief Collins, BJ Gruber, and the SROs. Leslie was there as well to talk about, you know, what those roles and responsibilities are. We do have they presented us with the MOU. We had some conversations to tweak it in some form or fashion, but I'm really appreciative of the police department's effort to really listen to our concerns and go out and do some research and put together really a really good plan for our school resource officers' roles and responsibilities. Really looking forward to that. They did also modify their uniforms somewhat, so they won't be in full gear. They'll kind of have a different type of vest that they can wear under, kind of a polo, you know, to kind of present themselves as more of a plain clothes person within the building. I don't know if you have any questions about that, but that's basically that.
Okay. Any questions?
Yep.
All right. Thank you, Ron. All right, next we'll move on to the Assistant Superintendent's report. Jen?
So I just wanted to give additional updates on enrollment. I know that has been a conversation, and we're continuing to work through that process. So as reported now, we have 4,242 students enrolled, with 1,100 students enrolled in our online program. With that program, we do have 44 students who are new to Marion City Schools who have enrolled in the online program. I was asked about our kindergarten numbers and preschool numbers. We're at 221 kindergarten students with 62 students in the online program and 136 preschool students enrolled. We are working through the appeal process now, so as you know, with the hybrid model, we have asked students whose guardian last name A through J are Monday, Tuesday, K through Z on Thursday, Friday, but we did release an opportunity for the appeal process for that, and that is open throughout this week. With that, we do feel like we'll have a great level of confidence and ability to physically distance our students in all of our classrooms. With our largest building being 309 student enrollment, so that means daily, we would have roughly 150 students in each of our buildings, or less. In some buildings, much less. So we feel very confident in the ability to physically distance our students per the guidelines of the Marion Public Health Department. But again, we are going through that process with the alpha appeal letters this week. Okay. Are there any questions that I can answer about enrollment or anything specific about enrollment?
How's kindergarten numbers compared to last year?
There are about 150 students, fewer than they would have been at this time last year. And I based that on this time last year being our first week of school. So again, prior to last year, when we had done sort of that rolling registration, we fully anticipate kindergartners coming to school without being registered, because this year we, obviously with communication about COVID and registration and all of that. Right now we're sitting at about 110 students who have not completed their open enrollment forms. So I anticipate some of those students still, coming to school. I also anticipate kindergarten students coming to school, not registered as well.
So you're building your staffing around that?
We do have
those
that taken into
presumptions.
consideration, yes. for kindergarten.
Any other questions for Jen? All right. Thank you, Jen. We'll move on to the treasurer's report. A motion to approve board minutes from July 20th board meeting.
So moved.
Thank you.
Second?
Thank you. Discussion? None. Roll call, please.
Mr. McCreary?
Yes.
Mr. Ines?
Yes.
Mr. McInnes?
Yes.
Mrs. McKay?
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder?
Yes. Board minutes approved. Next, we'll move on to the motion to approve the following financial items. July financial reports as presented, then and now, and then Express Scripts, Smith's Foods for $3,401.72, and Premier Produce $6,951. Motion, please.
So moved.
Second?
Thank you. Discussion? None. Roll call, please.
Mr. Ines?
Yes.
Mr. McInnes?
Yes.
Mrs. McKay?
Yes.
Mr. McCreary?
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder?
Yes. Financial items approved. Next, we'll move on to the hearing of the public. We do have two submissions this evening. First is from Mandy Smith at 228 Thew Avenue. It says, good evening. I am wanting to know if the board is going to follow the Ohio Department of Education recommendation and move curriculum for fall 2020 completely virtual. The Ohio Department of Education has released an official statement recommending that all areas that are COVID level 3 or 4 only offer all virtual learning until their COVID alert level lowers to a level 1 or 2 for more than 2 consecutive weeks. Will the district make this choice for the safety of our teachers and children? Thank you, Mandy, for your concern. And we have been working very closely, as Dr. Rusi has stated, working very closely with Marion Public Health and taking the recommendations, and we are doing our best to follow all safety protocols and are moving forward with a hybrid model at this time. And so school is set to start August 31st. Any comments, Dr. Iverson?
Yeah, and again, I think, there is a perception out there that, when ODE made some recommendations that when this color system first came out is when they made these recommendations. At this point in time, again, the health departments have been told that within those colors, they really need to pay attention to what has caused a county to change colors. And so, again, if you have a congregate facility that's kind of isolated and that's what brings your numbers up to cause you to a certain color, that doesn't necessarily mean it has a direct effect on the schools. And so upon their recommendation, with them knowing where the cases are and the possibility of that spread from those cases, again, their recommendation is hybrid. So our model is technically half, 3/5 virtual and 2 times face-to-face. So we technically are under some virtual model, but again, it's important to know in our community, we really are striving to get our kids back in school. And 6 weeks ago, probably we were fully planning on having our kids back full on face-to-face, and that's what we aspire to have as well. But again, with our hybrid model, as Jen said, with our enrollment numbers, we feel confident that our kids will be following all the guidelines that have been presented to us and will be as safe as we possibly can.
Thank you. All right, we'll move on to the next submission. Betsy Ratliff, 397 Mount Vernon Avenue. And since staff and students are able to safely return to the buildings, when will the board meetings once again be open to the public? When these meetings are closed to the public, it limits the interaction of the district's citizens with the elected board members. Just as relationships between staff and students are important to nurture, so too are the relationships between the board and the public. Thank you, Betsy. Yes, and we have, as a board, had a lot of discussion in regards to this, and we have, over the past 3 meetings, kind of gradually come together to meet in person while we're not open to the public. But moving forward in September, we are going to have our meeting open to the public to attend, but also offer the YouTube option for people to listen and view virtually. So as long as there's no restrictions that are put upon us between now and our next meeting from Public Health or the governor, we will intend to meet with inviting people to attend. So I hope that answers your question. All right. With that, we will move on to the agenda confirmation. Are there any additions or deletions? Okay.
Move to approve as printed.
Second?
Thank you. Okay. Discussion, none. Roll call?
Mr. Ives?
Yes.
Mr. McCreary?
Yes.
Mr. McInnes?
Yes.
Mrs. McKay?
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder?
Yes. All right, there is no old business. We'll move on to new business. Dr. Irucci recommends the adoption of the changes to student handbook for the 2021 school year. Motion, please.
So moved.
Second. Thank you. Discussion? None. Roll call, please.
Mr. McInnes?
Yes.
Mrs. McKay?
Yes.
Mr. McCreary?
Yes.
Mr. Ives?
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder?
Yes. Motion carried. The next is the Department of Police MOU. Dr. Irucci recommends the approval of the MOU between Marion City Schools and the City of Marion Department of Police as presented.
So moved.
Second?
Thank you. Any discussion? None. Roll call, please.
Mrs. McKay?
Yes.
Mr. McInnes?
Yes.
Mr. Ives?
Yes.
Mr. McCreary?
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder?
Yes. Motion carried. All right. Next is a remote learning plan. Dr. Irucci recommends the approval of the Marion City Schools remote learning plan outlined for submission to ODE to allow for flexibility in schedules and school model to meet the needs of all students and families. Motion, please.
So moved.
Thank
Second.
you. Thank you. Discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. McInnes?
Yes.
Mr. McCreary?
Yes.
Mrs. McKay?
Yes.
Mr. Imes?
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder?
Yes, motion carried. All right, next we'll move on to the Marion City preschool handbook. Dr. Irucci recommends the approval of the 2021 preschool handbook.
So moved.
Thank you.
Second?
Thank you. Discussion? Roll call, please.
Mrs. McKay?
Yes.
Mr. Imes?
Yes.
Mr. McCreary?
Yes.
Mr. McInnes?
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder?
Yes, motion carried. Next, we'll move on to the new business agreements and contracts, which I believe there are 10 of them. Dr. Irucci recommends the approval of an agreement between Marion City Schools and the Educational Service Center of Central Ohio for speech and language services provided to St. Mary's.
Are you going to do them all?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. The next is approval of an agreement between Marion City Schools and Carefree Education Service Group to provide gifted program oversight. An agreement between Marion City Schools and Studies Weekly to provide science and social studies material to elementary grade levels. An agreement between Marion City Schools and Learning A through Z for digital literacy resources for the 2021 school year. A contract between the Marion City Schools and Monarch Teaching Technologies for the Visi Learning software to support students' IEPs. Next is the contract between Marion City Schools and the Presence Learning to provide teletherapy services. And next is approval of an agreement between Marion City Schools and New ZLA for a school-wide license of Grant Middle School and Harding High School. An agreement between Marion City Schools and Excelis for online educational programming. An agreement between Marion City Schools and Safely Home to provide specialized education programs for services for students. I believe that is all 10 of them. If I could get a motion, please.
I move to approve.
Thank
Second.
you.
Second.
Thank you. Are there any discussion? None? Roll call, please.
Mr. Imes?
Yes.
Mr. McCreary?
Yes.
Mrs. McKay?
Yes.
Mr. McInnes?
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder?
Yes. Motion carried. Move on to the consent calendar. All matters listed under the consent calendar agenda are considered by the board to be routine and will be enacted by the board in one motion in the form listed below. There will be no discussion of these items prior to the time of the board votes on the motion unless members of the board, staff, or the public request specific items to be discussed and removed from the consent agenda. The superintendent recommends approval of all consent agenda items. Employment is specifically conditioned on and subject to successful background checks, receipt, and final administrative review of all application records and receipt of all other necessary documentation. Motion, please.
So moved.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you.
I just have a quick question. This
Sure.
is probably just something I'm missing myself here. Veronica, you sent an update this afternoon adding 2 more LPNs.
Yes.
Where I couldn't find
Can't
them.
find them? Oh, boy.
I mean, it's not that big a deal, it's just that
From,
Is that in the classified hires?
Yes. It's Amanda
Yeah,
Lanning and Ashley Sickmiller.
I see it now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
All right.
Thank you, I'm sorry.
Sorry about that.
thank you. Okay, roll call.
Mr. McCreary?
Yes.
Mrs. McKay?
Yes.
Mr. Imes?
Yes.
Mr. McInnes?
Yes.
Mrs. Snyder?
Yes. Motion carried. Okay, we'll move on to the board announcements.
I think there's a wrong, okay, yeah.
Oh,
Anyway.
okay. All right, so our next board meeting is scheduled for September 21st at 6 p.m. We will be working out the logistics of the next board meeting, so location is to be determined. So we will let everybody know that closer to time. Are there any committee reports? I don't believe so. All right, is there a need for an executive session tonight? No need? All right. Any information or discussion items? None?
I just want to say, I want to thank the administrators, DCS especially, and thank the teachers. I know they're working hard, especially starting today. I want to thank you for all the hard work and preparations going into this for the last few months, because as we've often talked about, this is a moving target. It changes almost every day, and that's it's hard to deal with, and I appreciate what you've done and the plans you've put in place.
Yes, I will ditto that. Thank you for all the work that has been done to prepare us for where we are today, and all the work that will be done in the 2 weeks to come to get us ready for our students. Truly appreciate it. Okay, with that,
I'll move to adjourn.
Second. I'll second.
thank you. We'll adjourn this meeting at 6:47. Motion?